I just watched two really popular pieces of Asian-centered media. Well, one Asian-centered, the other not so much. Both of these shows feature Asian main characters, but with very different genres and filming styles. K-pop Demon Hunters is an inspiring modern fantasy with anime-like style, good writing, likable characters, and a banger soundtrack. It's also a movie musical about the world of K-pop that has become insanely popular in the past decade. It's a globally popular piece of mass media, and as an East Asian, it's heartening to see it do well. My pessimism about Asian-focused media just being a trend is hopefully being proven wrong by KPDH, which is a great piece of Asian representation. From a literary critique standpoint, I think it holds up against the litany of Orientalist tropes that have infected modern Asian stories. We'll get into the theory, where I'll use my guy Edward Said and his classic book, Orientalism, along with cultural critic Ray Chow a little later. On the other hand, we have The Summer I Turned Pretty, which is another YA novel adaptation to a teen rom-com show by Jenny Han that I'm talking about on this channel. This show has a half-Asian main character, Belly, but is not Asian-centered in the slightest. In fact, the show is radically East Coast WASP Caucasian in almost all of its aspects. Our main character, Belly, is obnoxiously enamored with these two white brothers that she's known since she was young, Conrad and Jeremiah. They're all longtime family friends who have spent their summers in Cousins, a fictional beach town meant to invoke something like the Hamptons or other East Coast vacation spots. Belly has a strange obsession with the place, and she can't help but romanticize her nostalgia for it way too much, to the point of fetishization. And a big part of it is that, yes, she misses the physical place itself, but she also has a lot of nostalgia for watching the two brothers swim around and being attracted to them.
With the boys. The boys most of all.
And I'll be honest with you guys, I've only watched the latest season. I'm sorry. My girlfriend has been filling me in on what happened before in the last two seasons, and I read the pilot script, but I don't know how much more of this show I can take, guys. The reason I seem so aggravated when I talk about Summer is because I think Summer is what I would call a rage bait show. If you don't know, rage bait is a ubiquitous cultural phenomenon where creators will put their viewers into fits of anger with inflammatory pieces of media, politics, news, art, literally anything. It is completely pervasive.
Not gonna lie, Curry was not winning another ring without KD.
Yeah, he was.
Curry was not winning another ring without KD.
He won it without KD.
He was not.
Rage bait has existed before, but the term was coined in our modern social media era because it has been exponentially exacerbated by the so-called attention economy and algorithmic social media platforms. Hell, we even elected a president who ran his whole campaign based off of rage bait. This is also a tactic employed here by Jenny Han, where Belly acts in completely nonsensical ways just to attract the attention of these two white men. White boys, I should say. Laura Mulvey's famous critique of the male gaze in film is relevant here. The presence of woman is an indispensable element of spectacle in normal narrative film. As Bud Bedecker has put it, what counts is what the heroine provokes, or rather what she represents. She is the one who makes him act the way he does. In herself, the woman has not the slightest importance. Belly falls into this trap time and time again, to the frustration of the viewers, because all of her actions are for these two brothers from episode 1. Stylistically, though, the show is female-led, female-written, so it kind of avoids just being a complete, gross objectification of a powerless sex object in some other male-focused piece of media. Nevertheless, though, the problem still remains. If all of Belly's choices are just for two dudes, then all the character becomes is what she provokes in the male main characters, just with the aesthetic of shallow neoliberal feminism. I'm a dumb straight man, and it's still super obvious to me. It's just frustrating to watch this girl, especially if you're the target audience of this show, which is young women. Needless to say, K-pop Demon Hunters' popularity comes from the humanity and agency of its main characters. People love to see badass women on the screen. All three members of Huntrix, the main characters, are complex and are much more focused on saving the world than anything having to do with a man. Even main protagonist Rumi's romance with Joseon Dynasty popper turned demonic K-pop male star Jinu is not a main plot driver in the film. Also, Rumi is the main character and gets her backstory fleshed out the most, but the other two members of Huntrix are still very complex, and their backstories get filled out so damn efficiently. All of their actions make sense with their characters, and their behavior is actually even spelled out in a fun scene with like an Asian specialist doctor where he diagnoses all of their psychological problems. Rumi's coldness, Mira's aggression, and Zoe's people-pleasing. They're immediately relatable, and I'd argue that they reflect real-life experiences that are distinctly East Asian. Not to say it's not relatable for literally everyone who watches, but that distinct pressure of so-called Asianness shines through. On that note, let's get into the other side of this intersection, which is the Asianness of these two works. After all, the stories are about Asian women. When it comes to Summer, there is no trace of Asianness in Belly as a character besides her Asian features. That is to say, her character is written like a white person in a white environment. That begs the question, what is a white character? What is an Asian character? Good question. I've milled about with East Asian writers of TV and film here in sunny Los Angeles, and I've heard the sentiment that Asian characters don't need to be written so Asian. So Asian meaning characters who act stereotypically Asian, signifying their difference, performing their Asianness. We know them well, and I've talked about them in other videos. Long Duck Dong and 16 Candles, Mickey Rooney and Breakfast at Tiffany's, Pat Morita and Karate Kid, Miiko Taka and Sayonara. In those racist classics, Asians were looked at in a clearly Oriental lens. Orientalism was a branch of study concerning the Orient. The Orient being anything east of the civilized West, or Europe, when the study was conceived of in the colonial 18th century. Orientalism was later rigorously and surgically exposed by legendary Palestinian-Egyptian scholar Edward Said. Said's claim is that Orientalism had no basis in the real lives of the people of the Orient, or its detailed histories or distinct cultures, but served as a field of study to create the essential qualities of the logical and civilized West against the backwards but mystical East. At bottom, Orientalism is a field that ontologically places inherent superiority of the West over the East while conveniently justifying colonialism. Said laboriously shows the full history of Western Orientalist thought through the works of ancient Greek historian Herodotus to Rudyard Kipling, the author of The Jungle Book, and many other colonialist works, to Jenny Han's Summer I Turned Pretty. I'll be doing the connection to that last one. But what does this old stuff have to do with these very modern works? After all, racism against Asians in the US is solved. Look at how much money the average East Asian makes. Imperialism? Who's she? They don't do that to us. We cooperated with America after they bombed us, and then we made anime and K-pop. It's just those other backwards countries in the Middle East that are backwards and violent, but not us. Us Asians are obedient. We provide so much value. A couple of countries are still backward with their communism and their dictators, but that has no effect on us Asian Americans. We take the good and we throw out the bad. So, hey, let's just write a fucking show where the main character is Asian, but is actually just white, and we all think that's realistic, and that's fine because Asians are basically white at this point. Obviously, I'm joking, but many Asian Americans think this. I thought this. I'm privileged and educated. My family line worked hard to get here to the US, and I should be grateful. Always grateful. I shouldn't even think of my original home country, unless it's a country with awesome neoliberal democracy gifted by the US after they bombed them, like Japan or Taiwan or South Korea. Don't get it twisted, South Korea. But still don't identify with them too much because nothing beats the USA. As a Chinese American though, unfortunately, I have to look down at my mother country as something lost to totalitarianism. Orientalism tells us that it's police state China and your social credit score, will go down if you criticize the dear leader. Such obedient Asians out there. And if you're a Southeast Asian, forget it. There's nowhere more backwards than communist Vietnam, hopeless Myanmar, Muslim Indonesia, the unfixably corrupt Philippines. Do you see the picture that's being built here? That's the Orientalism of today. This comes back to The Summer I Turned Pretty in an interesting way because the show takes the integrationalist approach when it comes to Bellie's Asianness, which is erasing her Asianness altogether. This is kind of weird to me because Jenny Han hasn't shied away from making her characters more signifiably Asian, like in Exo Kitty. But Summer, on the other hand, has that Asianness totally lobotomized. When that happens, it becomes a traditional YA teen drama that feels weirdly incomplete. This racial lobotomy, lack of female agency, and overall nonsensical behavior is a recipe that makes people frustrated with this show. Like, why the hell does she love this man who cheated on her? What's her problem with Conrad taking time to grieve his mother? Why is Bellie causing so much drama? Are we even supposed to like this girl? There's no good reason for any of it because her parents got divorced. Like, who cares? Why do the brothers' dying mother want Bellie to fuck one of her children so badly? Like, what is going on?
Susanna told me that when I was born, she knew I was destined for one of her boys. I always hoped it would be Conrad.
There's nothing to be worried about. They're rich, no financial problems, no cultural differences between the families. The whole show is just so obnoxiously focused on Bellie and her romance with Jeremiah and Conrad and how much they change their minds over nothing. The characters feel hollow, one-dimensional, and even childish at times. I think that that's symptomatic of its broader Orientalist problem, which is the implicit admission that East Coast WASP culture is all-encompassing. I read the pilot and there are light references to Bellie's family not fitting in. Like, Bellie's mom said that she didn't want to get sunken placed a la Get Out, but it really is nominal. It has no weight in the plot. Bellie is like the mascot of Cousins Beach. Like, what the fuck? Watching these two white boys swim is her happy place. There isn't even a fucking H-Mart, bro. What is there to miss? In Orientalism, Said makes a similar point about Asian integration into the West through T.E. Lawrence's writings and contributions to the Arab revolt against the Ottoman Empire in World War I. If you don't know who T.E. Lawrence is, which would make sense because this is a video about a kids movie and a teenage rom-com, nonetheless, he's a British officer who helped the Arabs revolt against the Ottoman Empire during World War I in the area of modern Iraq. Lawrence is historically depicted as having a positive influence on the Orient by the West. He helped an oppressed people rise up against a despotic empire as depicted in the 1961 movie Lawrence of Arabia. He also wrote extensively about this topic, and his writings were very famous and very influential. This is where Said makes his criticism of said writings as a new stage of Orientalism. Indeed, what Lawrence presents to the reader is an unmediated expert power, the power to be, for a brief time, the Orient. The effect of this style is that it brings Asia tantalizingly close to the West, but only for a brief moment. Said claims that Lawrence represented the ultimate expert and leader who could lead the static old world of the Orient and then occidentalize it by getting the Arabs to revolt against the Ottomans. Lawrence considered himself, and the white man in general, and this is a huge theme in Orientalist writing, as a almost father-like figure, a mentor for the Orientals, which echoes the much more modern model minority myth. If you work hard in our neoliberal society as a minority, you can actually reach the status of a white man, which, of course, you never actually can. This is also the origin of the white savior trope, which has plagued so much of Western media, and the actual reality of violent Western intervention. This imperial tradition from Britain was carried over to America in its violent installation of democracies overseas. The most relevant of which in this video is the American intervention in Korea, which was fucking disastrous, by the way. Nonetheless, the universality of Said's book in the West's cultural regard and political approach to the imperialized, colonized, and exploited people of the world is its greatest strength. Even though Said mostly covers the Middle East and its interactions with France, the United States, and Britain, his systematic deconstruction of the discourse of Orientalism shows a consistency with all Western interactions with the Orient. Said also says in this book that there's so much more to add to this methodology, including studies of the Far East, or the East Asians, which Said doesn't cover in this book. That brings me back to Summer I Turned Pretty and K-pop Demon Hunters, in how much they assimilate into Orientalism, or in non-theory terms, how good is their Asian representation. I'd argue that traditional Orientalist assimilation, in the sense of T.E. Lawrence, is exemplified in Summer I Turned Pretty. That is to say, by erasing Belly's culture completely and assimilating her as a white character, Han magically fixes the model minority myth, making the story feel weirdly incomplete. And that's the most positive reading of this work. Honestly, a more pessimistic view, you could say that The Summer I Turned Pretty is white supremacist. Now, I don't think Han had this intention, obviously, and I think that there's something to be said for her strategy here. Cultural critic Ray Chow describes the problem of performing one's ethnicity with her theory of coercive mimesis. When minority individuals think that, by referring to themselves, they are liberating themselves from the powers that subordinate them, they may actually be allowing such powers to work in the most intimate fashion, from within their hearts and souls, in a kind of voluntary surrender that is, in the end, fully complicit with the guilty verdict that has been declared on them socially long before they speak. Coercive mimesis is basically feeling like you need to confess or perform your own ethnicity in order to preserve so-called authenticity as an ethnic. It's a part of that weird and difficult problem I mentioned earlier. What is a white story, and what is an Asian story? And I'm biracial, so what the fuck does that mean? I have mentioned in previous videos that I'm kind of insecure about how Chinese I really am. Chow considers this to be a product of racist expectations of authenticity being placed on me. How much Chinese do I really know? Can I cook Chinese food? Can I write Chinese stories? Whatever that means. Chow is quick to point out the double standard in that when white people are identifying with a non-white culture, they do not in any way become less white. I certainly don't worry about feeling authentically white, like, ever. The idea of proving my whiteness is pretty laughable, because I'll never be white to the white person. While proving my Asianness seems like a much more serious endeavor with actual political stakes. Therefore, it is understandable that Han has this concern, being an Asian American herself, trying to assimilate into white culture. But there's kind of a point where we just go back to square one with Orientalist assimilation, and that's the problem that The Summer I Turned Pretty has. And this comes from the politicization of race, which has implications on your own bodily safety and autonomy. We are seeing this today in America with its move towards racial profiling and its policing with ICE. Therefore, for safety, we want to be what we never can be, the white man. So does K-pop Demon Hunters fall into the trap of coercive mimesis? It's interesting because I think on the surface, K-pop Demon Hunters seems to perform its Asianness quite a bit in its use of K-pop iconography. Nevertheless, the almost inhuman standards of the K-pop industry are actually critiqued in the movie, with the characterization of Huntrix against their parallel, the Saja Boys. Huntrix is not perfect. They eat a lot of food, sometimes they have problems in their group, they have problems writing songs, and they're not excessively polite at all times. I saw a TikTok talking about what K-pop fans would cancel Huntrix over and had things like doing songs in English and dating while in a girl group. K-pop fans' parasocial behavior make that industry one where you are critiqued for literally everything. Your work ethic, your looks, your behavior, etc. Then the narrative foil to Huntrix are the Saja Boys, who are quite literally not human. They're demons who use magic to fool people into thinking that they're like a genuine group of nice boys, which is like a classic male K-pop group trope. They're also insanely beautiful and make annoying, catchy, and commercialized music. Their song Soda Pop isn't evil. On the contrary, it's very light and bubbly and positive, and any soda brand would love to use it for their commercials. Their songs are impersonal and commercialized as opposed to Huntrix's more genuine songs. Of course, the most popular song from the movie is Golden, which has hit the Billboard Top 100 for like a few weeks now. And that song was very personal and literally spelled out Rumi's arc throughout the whole movie. Executive producer of the album of the soundtrack, Ian Eisendrath, described it as an I want song in the traditional like musical movie structure. It serves the purpose of giving Rumi her main through-line objective throughout the movie. Put these patterns in the past now, and finally live like the girl they all see. Of course, this sounds a little corny, and it is a kid's movie after all, but it is undoubtedly emotionally effective. This is where K-pop Demon Hunters kind of gets past that coercive mimesis by actually acknowledging it. I think that these women are complex, contradictory, and struggle with self-loathing. Chow describes that same self-loathing in Ethnics. Because, however conscientiously they attempt to authenticate themselves, and especially when they attempt conscientiously, they will continue to come across as inferior imitations, copies that are permanently out of focus. According to Chow, you need to be the perfect representation of your race to be considered authentic. K-pop Demon Hunters performs a similar dynamic, with Rumi and her strained identity between being a demon and a demon hunter. That distinct self-loathing is a result of Chow's coercive mimesis, in that she's literally not enough of a demon or a human, which puts her into a state of shame over her inadequacy. Rumi tries to authenticate herself by repressing who she really is and leading into her identity as a hunter at the beginning of the movie, and then by the crisis before the climax point of the film, she leans fully into being a demon. Jinu, who is Rumi's romantic interest and narrative foil, goes through a parallel arc where he renounces his humanity to become an immortal demon and achieve artificial perfection. Jinu then gives it up by the end of the film and accepts his shame for his betrayal of his Joseon dynasty family. These are classic fantasy and anime tropes, but they perform genuine work when showing the hybridity of the Asian who is forced to perform their race through being a cultural K-pop icon while having to live with the painful shame of their forever inadequacy, never being Asian enough, never being perfect. This juxtaposition hits home not just for East Asians or Koreans, but for anybody who feels disconnected from their culture and feel forced to pick up bits and pieces of their history in our modern neoliberal society. This is what Chow describes as the abject, those who are not subject or even object in their own self-representation, but abject and completely disconnected from their sense of self, their ego. The ego is torn apart by this hybridization of being both inside and outside of society, performing my Asianness to show who I really am, to be inside of society, but never quite being enough, never quite being myself. In Rumi's case, it's being a demon and a human while never being accepted by either side. This is closer to a genuine art within the representation of being Asian because it deals with the forced, coerced performance of one's own ethnicity. K-pop Demon Hunters is still a kid's movie with a positive ending where Rumi accepts herself and her friends accept her too, but it's within its sophisticated navigation of Asian diasporic struggle that strikes a genuine chord with so many audiences around the world. It is not popular because it invokes rage bait by performing whiteness or being a helpless female main character like the Samurai Turned Pretty. It doesn't magically fix the problem of racism by making its Asian main character white. Alright, that was a long essay. It was very dense. Thank you so much for watching. This one was really fun. Obviously had a lot of fun reading Orientalism by Edward Said. It is such a classic. I definitely recommend it. And the much less popular and talked about Ray Chow. Super duper based. Has great modern literary theory that helped me so much in looking at Asian works of art. Asian art is becoming obviously very popular. I've talked about it a billion times, and as it enters more into the public zeitgeist, into our public culture, I love to analyze and always will analyze it. If you love Samurai Turned Pretty and hated K-pop Demon Hunters, let me know in the comments. Feel free, like or hate whatever you want. And that's pretty much it. Like, comment, subscribe, start the discussion in the comments, please. Bye-bye!